Indianapolis Public Library, and Strangebird. I'm going to try at the end as well, but Rufus, yell at me if I don't. Thank you. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
So, hello, everybody. I'm Clark Giles. A little bit about myself. Formerly, I always describe myself as a lawyer who keeps getting pulled back into being an IT guy. But formerly, in former lives, I was an IT director at Indiana University. Then I was the chief technology officer for the city of Indianapolis. I was the first chief information security officer in the history of Indianapolis. Then I went and I was the chief information security officer at Butler University for a while, served on Governor Holcomb's cybersecurity council, executive council, founding member of the DEF CON Bar Association, which you may have seen DEF CON mentioned multiple times in this book. It's a computer hacker convention that happens out in Vegas every year. So it was one of the founding members of a bunch of attorneys that came together and said, hey, there's a bunch of attorneys at this event. We should also have our own little subgroup. So member of that. I try to attend DEF CON when I can. Now I'm currently the data privacy officer for North America for Knauf Installation Incorporated. So just over North America, Mexico, United States, and Canada, and 6 plants here in the United States and multiple other locations. Also have my own law practice, which we do mainly business and real estate, but germane to the conversation here, I have kind of a niche practice helping small, medium businesses respond to cyber breaches and hacking attacks. So that's a little bit about it.
So many hats that he wears. It was funny. We were reading this book kind of side by side, and he kept just saying, this is exactly what I do. And I really enjoyed the book. I'm going to be giving it a 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. But what did you think of the book as being like in the professional world, in that realm? Because like I really have no background in IT or law or anything that has to do with this. So this was all kind of new other than like just having casual conversation with you in the past.
Yeah, so I would say I've read multiple books by this author. He's very well known in the cybersecurity realm. I would also give it 4 out of 5 stars. Maybe 4.5 maybe. I think it's a great kind of written for a general audience type book, introduction to cybersecurity and some of the matters. And while I don't agree with the author on everything, we may get into that with some of the questions. I do think it's a great introductory book, and I think it speaks to the urgency of some of these issues and why it matters to a person that maybe doesn't work in cybersecurity or even IT day to day.
Mm-hmm. So I'll go ahead and get straight into one of the questions then for you. Throughout the book, we kind of have this like, machines that are now full of computers, and like you can't fix them yourself anymore. You have to take them with authorized dealers, authorized parts, and it's really just all computerized at this point. I wrote these down. Do you think that we're going to see a rise of like strictly analog manufacturers to like kind of fit a desire of the consumer to want to return back to their kind of like more analog type of setups and the kind of right to repair idea?
Yeah, so 2 things about that. One, I think there's always going to be from an entrepreneurial, putting that hat on, I think there's always going to be like a niche market for like a purely mechanical device that provides some kind of function, like a purely mechanical alarm clock that you don't have to have an app on your phone to operate, or a purely mechanical lock that you don't have to unlock with Bluetooth on your phone. So I think that there's going to be definitely some more opportunities as things get more computerized and we start putting everything on the internet with the Internet of Things. There's still going to be that niche market out there for, frankly, a lot of people like me that just want something purely mechanical, and I don't need my alarm clock on the internet, so I just need it to work. So there's going to be that. But I think also, in addition to like market forces, there's going to be a lot of opportunities that are being pushed, frankly, by like government and attorneys and lawsuits going on right now. Like Massachusetts passed the legislation a few years ago that was like an automotive right to repair, because they were with like John Deere. They were having a lot of problems with like mechanic shops running into issues making repairs to like computer equipment or updates to software that they were worried about voiding a warranty or possibly getting sued by some of the auto manufacturers. So Massachusetts passed a law that basically gave a safe harbor. It was challenged by some of the automotive industry, and it was thrown out. Actually, the challenge, not the law. So that's still in effect. John Deere was sued by, this book was published in 2018, but John Deere was sued by the FTC. I actually kind of thought that lawsuit might get thrown out with the administration change, but it did not. So it is still ongoing. They got sued for anti-competitive practices, specifically because of this right to repair issue that's spoken about in the book. And their last motion to dismiss actually got denied. So it's going to trial in June, and they're going to have to defend this practice of basically not allowing farmers to make their own repairs to this equipment and possibly invalidating, any of their warranty or relationship. There's a lot of state laws being passed too around right of repair. So I think, just to briefly sum up here to answer your question, there's always going to be a niche market from the private sector, but also there's a lot of pressure and forces on the legal sphere and on the government sphere as well. That's really trying to, the trend overall is for right to repair.
Interesting. Do you think that we'll see like cars or farming equipment used in this specific example that have no computers in them at all?
I think the computers will still be in them, but the framework we're seeing around a lot of these right to repair laws are that they have to either be like open source, or they have to make a toolkit available, for 7 years. What they don't want is like a company having to maintain and create like a toolkit and make it available for a product that's 40 years old. Mm-hmm. But you're seeing these, the legislation says for 7 years after it's released into the market or 7 years after it's sold, these consumers will have this right to repair, and you can provide tools to help facilitate that. And it provides a safe harbor from consumers from being sued, mm-hmm. Or having their warranty voided because they took on an effort to repair the item themselves.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I don't even probably realize how many cars I've had that have computers in them. I would assume all of them.
All of them,
given when I started driving.
Yeah.
I have a quote from it's chapter 5, page 79 in my book. Oh, we have a question. Yes, go ahead.
Follow up on what you're saying. Do we have any idea what the current administration's attitude is toward right to repair?
We don't, or at least I don't know. It's not really a subject that I closely follow, so maybe they've made a statement on it. But I think just by the fact that so many FTC lawsuits that were ongoing were thrown out when the administration changed, they reviewed every single lawsuit that was going on. So the fact that they left this one to remain tells me that at worst they're apathetic or agnostic to right to repair, or it tells me that they're supportive of it. So, I think that or at least the issue hasn't been politicized yet enough that either side feels like they've got to take a side on it. And so, it's farmers are still a pretty powerful lobby. Yeah, that's the broad and short answer. I'm not aware of an explicit statement made by the administration on right to repair, but it definitely crosses party lines. I see Republicans pushing for right to repair. I see Democrats pushing for it. It kind of depends on more your unique nature of your state and your constituency group, I think. Yeah.
Okay. So on page 79 of my book, I have this quote from the author that is, "My car has an internet connection, and while I'm worried that someone will hack into the car and eavesdrop on my conversation through Bluetooth connection, a confidentiality threat, I am much more worried that they will disable the brakes, an availability threat, or modify the parameters of the automatic lane centering and following distance systems, an integrity threat. The confidentiality threat affects my privacy. The availability integrity threats can kill me." So when considering this example and the potential harm, at what point do you think consumers will have no confidence in their own personal safety of their own cars? When are consumers what's the threshold that we got to hit?
Yeah, I don't think there'll ever be a tipping point. I don't think consumers have a lot of confidence in their car now, but I don't think it's never a tipping point so bad that they're not willing to get in the car and turn the key and, get from point A to point B. This doesn't help the person that if a tragedy was to befall them. But I do think over time, government policy and lawsuits, consumer lawsuits or consumer safety lawsuits will make these things more safe. I mean, the first time that a car gets hacked and, they've demoed this at DEF CON, but the first time it's used in like a criminal setting and a car is like hacked and turned as it's driving and someone crashes and loses their life or there's, significant property damage. I think there will be government action that forces some of the things that he talks about later in the book, like having your car only connect to the internet at certain points or, various things. I also think that generally as a trend, it's in cybersecurity, it's called like hardening a device. It comes from the military. It's a military term where it's basically like you can take a device out of the box and then you do various things to it to make it more safe or to make it more secure. I think just as part of our culture, we're going to get more into hardening devices. There's guides on YouTube that you can look up, like, hey, I got a new car, I got a new Ford F-150. How do I harden it for cybersecurity? And there's all sorts of nerds out there on the internet that will give you advice, like how to turn Bluetooth off by default or turn your network connection off by default or not allow unauthorized devices. So it's going to be a culture change as well. But I think people will be driving for a long time.
Okay, and that kind of leads us into the one and only turn and talk I have. Sorry about that. Let's see. In chapter 5, the author states that he is less worried about AI. However, this book was written in 2018, and technology has advanced considerably in the last 7 years. Are you all less worried or more worried about AI at this point? And Rufus, how long do we normally do for turn and talks?
Usually 5 to 10 minutes is how long.
Perfect. 10 minutes. Let's go with that. More, do you agree with the author that he's not like all that worried?
I'm way more worried.
Yeah. Do you think
so-
he's way more like Bruce? Bruce, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bruce Schneier.
Yeah. Do you think he's more worried now?
I would say he's probably more worried now.
Yeah.
I think in 2018, it was pretty difficult to AI definitely existed then and machine automation existed then. I think it was so much more nascent than it is now. And we're really, from a consumer level, seeing the full potential of AI in multiple different applications. And I would suspect he's more worried about it now, especially than when there's been a lot of demos of like AI assisted vulnerability scanning or AI assisted social engineering, where an AI can listen to a CEO's voice on LinkedIn for 10 seconds and then perfectly recreate their voice and make social engineering calls asking people to buy Amazon gift cards. Or it can be out there just constantly scanning a network for vulnerabilities 24/7. I mean, like back when this book was written by Bruce in 2018, a hacker still needed to sleep. It may be a nation state where they may be working in shifts, or maybe a criminal enterprise where they're working in shifts. But now you can have an AI that's just trying to poke and prod and look for vulnerabilities every second of the day, 24/7. And as soon as a new node gets connected, it knows to look at that. It's self-repairing, self-replicating, much bigger threat now than I think people fully appreciated in 2018.
Yeah.
Myself included, probably.
Yeah. Because I mean, like 7 years ago is both a long time in the tech world, but also doesn't seem all that long.
Yeah.
So do you think that the author is astounded by how fast it has kind of evolved from just where it was even 2 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like,
I mean, are you astounded?
Thing, I'm astounded. I'll speak for myself. I don't know about him, but I'll say a theme that arises from reading a lot of his books is that he's very happy, like any good hacker or any good technician or engineer. He's very happy to admit when he's been wrong in the past. There's multiple things in this book where he's like, Yeah, like he's talking about one. I think he's talking about the WannaCry hack, where he's like, I
Yeah.
didn't think it was a nation state actor. I thought it was two guys in their basement, and I ended up being wrong.
Yeah, that was
it
the
completely a
Netflix
nation
one.
state. Netflix,
Right. Yeah, that was a Netflix
He's
one.
like, yeah, it was completely a nation state. You
Yeah.
know, and so he's very happy to say where he's been wrong or corrected, like any good scientist. You know, we learned something from that too. So, you know, I'm astounded. I speak for myself, and if I had been writing this book in 2018, I would have probably been pretty dismissive of AI too. I'd have been like, yeah, it's a threat, but it's not there yet. But in 2025, like when I see day to day what AI can do, I'm like, no, my list of threats are AI and like quantum computing.
Oh,
And
interesting.
quantum computing basically just allows you to like do computer processing by like an order of magnitude. So like all the things now with like that are encrypted that would take 100 years to break, with quantum computing may take 6 months, may take a week, may take a year, you know, tops. So it's a real danger. So quantum computing combined with AI. So if you had an AI that could search for vulnerabilities and you had quantum computing behind it that can basically crack any encryption that's out there until they can invent some kind of encryption based on quantum computing, it's like that's like a catastrophic DEFCON, you know, 5 level threat
Yeah.
that's really out there.
I mean, like, are we there?
This has issued new guidance on this allegedly quantum resistant leadership. So there's some guidance
Yeah.
on that, but it's early.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
I mean, is there anything like backing up any of the guidance? Like, it's like you do this for nefarious reasons and this is what happens? Or,
Well, I mean, we definitely still have the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, like that's still out there, you know, and we don't even probably have a good idea of everything that's going on right now. Like, I mean, there's nation states working on quantum computing. When one of them cracks it, if they haven't already, I'm not convinced they haven't already got it for a few years, because that whoever cracks this first to not let anyone else know,
yeah.
so that they're out there reading everything that's going on and, you know, doing everything that
Who do you think's going to crack it first?
U.S., China, or Israel.
Those are the big three players in the world.
I mean, Israel's very far ahead. Like they've really leaned into cybersecurity, and a lot of even the cybersecurity products that are out there in the market right now are Israeli based or were created in Israel. So I'm not saying that the nation state monitors all that stuff, you know, in the private sector, but like they would be in the best position to do that.
Yeah.
You know, then obviously United States and China are both working on it, you know, day in and day out.
Mhm.
You know, I'm not saying that some other country couldn't invent it first, but those are probably the three. If I was betting, one of those three are going to be probably the first.
How would, I mean, so they're not going to admit it. How would we know? An attack, like
We know
something
when
bad,
all of our
something
power,
really bad would
our
happen.
SCADA systems get shut down and we don't have any power across the whole country, or, you know, probably how we would actually know is probably good old fashioned espionage, you know, like where, you know, that's the we've got people probably on the payroll and they've got people on the payroll and double agents, triple agents.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I don't think you could keep it a secret for too long. You're going to probably have a green window of like a year or two where you could really exploit it. But, you know, if we're not in a state of war or anything, it's still going to be more like the advantage is going to be that you could read everything or crack everything and abscond with a bunch of information, confidential information, know everything that's going on. But, you know, if we're not in a state of like hostile active war, like the negative ill effects may be limited, and we still have traditional kinetic weaponry and everything else. So, you know, it's not a knockout punch, but it's definitely somebody who's going to be in a very good position.
Yeah. I mean, like 1 to 2 years is kind of a long time to be doing damage without anybody really knowing the catastrophic level.
A few years after World War II, when the U.S. was the only one with a bomb.
Oh, okay.
You know, it was like Now, we didn't go around invading everybody when
Yeah.
that happened, but like we had the big stick.
Yeah.
And until other people invented it, now other people did it pretty closely. And going back to good old fashioned espionage, you know, they got those secrets, and all the other countries got the secrets, and it, you know, spread out. It'll be that way with quantum computing too. Whoever invents it first, eventually everyone has a price, and secrets will leak. But it'll be a first mover advantage for sure.
Interesting. Okay. Sounds like a lot of groups are finishing up. Okay. All right. It sounds like some groups are finishing up. It's not quite 10 minutes, so I don't want to completely interrupt. I would love to hear like what all of you chatted about, if you would like to share. If you have any general questions to ask Clark at this time as well is good. Yes.
I think the interesting thing is there's two things to be scared of. What will AI legally do that might be scary, and then what illegal things might happen. Somebody hacked into the Skynet
Mm-hmm.
Terminator. So
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
two parts. And but more or less scared. I wasn't scared in 2019 because it wasn't in the newspaper, it wasn't on the news. I didn't think about it. So I think we're all more scared now than we were 6 years ago.
Yeah, and that was kind of the consensus that Clark and I drew to as well. That it's like it's kind of accelerated so fast, it's hard to keep up. Yes, please.
Maybe sort of the mundane aspect to it is all do the same thing if you don't tell, just more and more opportunities if somebody wants to hack into it, somebody wants to get a connection to it, just more opportunities.
Yeah, lots more data centers.
Yeah, I would say there's pros and cons to it. So like anytime you're concentrating a bunch of data in one center, you know, if that center was to get compromised, you know, now there's some logical controls between the servers. It's not like if you hack one server, you can necessarily do like a pivot and get to all the other servers, but just all being in one location, that there is a threat to that. Now, I think some of the, so that would be like a threat to like the integrity of the data. You know, like if we kind of go back to that CIA triad that's talked about in the book, the confidentiality, the integrity, and the accessibility. I mean, so if they shut down a data center, that could be a threat to the accessibility, could be a threat to the integrity or the confidentiality. But if you have multiple backups in different regions and you're able to back that data up across different regions, there's also an advantage to that as well. So, you know, it's like if they take out one data center, maybe in New York, and we still have the same data backups in Utah, you know, that's going to be a lot less disruption to the private sphere, whoever's keeping their data in that center, if there's backups available. And usually there are. You know, usually it's backed up in a different region. I know in any government work I've ever done, we always require that we use the data stored in the United States. That's just simple table stakes kind of requirement for us, though not every city does that. But for us, it was important. But we also, for critical information, because we classified all of our data, we would make sure that it also had a backup in a different climate region, a different geographical region of the United States, so that we could get that data back if we needed to.
That makes sense. Okay. If there's nothing further to add, that fear mongering and fear of AI leads very well into the next question I have for Clark. On page 91, again, of my copy, I don't know about all of your copies, the author says that cyber risk that keeps him up at night is a criminal attack that escalates out of control during a period when the U.S. prefers to act first and clean up afterwards. What is the risk that keeps you up at night?
Yeah, so just kind of, this will sound familiar to you because I'll just repeat what I just kind of said during the turn and talk. But to me, it's the combination of AI and quantum computing. So I think I've heard quantum computing mentioned here at the book club before, but basically imagine computer processing power like to an order of magnitude or 10 or 100 times order of magnitude from what it can do now. So encryption, that basically like that's like encoding data so that human eyes can't read it. Encryption now that's maybe very strong and would take 100 years for a computer to brute force the password or to guess it. With quantum computing, because it's an order of magnitude, it could be a matter of seconds or a matter of minutes. Now, when you combine quantum computing, which we don't know the true state of it yet, because as we were kind of talking about, when a nation state finally invents it or perfects it, we probably won't know for a few years. They're going to leverage that advantage to their maximum capacity to crack as much encryption as they can and to abscond with as much data as they can and learn as much as they can about potential adversaries and maybe allies. But when quantum computing, when you combine it with AI, where you can have, with like a traditional hacker group, whether it's a criminal enterprise or like a nation state, they still have to sleep at night. They're maybe working in shifts or they're coming in for their 8 hours where they try to hack some Fortune 500 company, but then they're off to hang with their girlfriend or their boyfriend at night, just like a regular job. With AI, it can constantly be searching 24/7. It can be doing vulnerable port scanning. It can be doing vulnerability scanning, and it can immediately exploit that. Like when it sees a vulnerability in a network, it can install a payload, if you don't have your right controls in place. And it can be doing that 24/7, 24 hours a day, every day. And then you combine that with quantum computing, it's a recipe for disaster. So that's what keeps me up at night. Although I would say, in all fairness to the author, in 2018, I probably would agree with him. I wouldn't be that worried about it. But it's just progressed so quickly and so fast, and it's almost like whiplash. I work in the field, and I'm having trouble keeping up. And we're seeing a lot of emerging legislation around it, especially in Europe. But yeah.
Like,
So what's your prediction for long use to singularity?
I don't. So I don't think we ever will. Like that's the singularity is basically where we can upload ourselves to a machine, and like our soul can exist in the machine. It's a Ray Kurzweil idea. I don't think we'll ever achieve that for various different reasons that probably are more religious or philosophical. But I do think we will get to a point 10 years from now where if I am an author with enough corpus of work, or I've written enough, or I have 30 books to my name, and there's a lot of videos about me, or I'm recorded, that someone could complete a computerized persona of me and write in my style and write in my voice and make predictions. I think that's, if not here already, coming very soon. And so to an outside person, it would seem like it was Clark. You could be convinced that Clark's soul got uploaded in a computer and was talking to you. Now, I don't think it would actually be me, but I think from a Turing, test effect, you could be convinced that it's that person.
Well, actually, what I meant is when singularity to me is when a computer or AI reaches a state of consciousness.
Oh, like general relative intelligence?
Right. And then
Yeah.
decides to make its own purpose.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm a little more gray on that. I still don't think that will. I still lean on the side that it will not, the way we think about human consciousness. I don't know if AI will ever get to that point, but I was so wrong I would have agreed with Bruce in 2018 about this, and I've totally changed my opinion in the last 5 to 7 years. So I don't know. Ask me in 5 years. Maybe I've changed.
yeah.
You mentioned European regulation. Are they doing a good job of going in the right direction? Are they ahead of us?
So I would say they are. So this goes firmly into just my opinion about it. It's a lot more restrictive. So especially around data privacy rights. You go to Europe, you've got to disclose any of the cookies or the any of the little information that they're gathering about you from visiting a website. That's all have to be explicitly consented to, and there's pretty onerous penalties, against the company that violates that. So from an individual consumer perspective, your individual rights, the rest of the world approaches data privacy as a human right, where in the United States, we approach it as a consumer protection issue. And I'm not saying there's one way that's better or worse, but it has real ramifications. And so Europeans treat it like it's a human right. So now, from my individual perspective, I think that's great. Now, if I run a startup where one of my revenue streams that I'm depending on is going to be, cross marketing or getting enough information from my customers that I can resell, I don't like those European legislation so much. It definitely stifles innovation. It's going to stifle, some business models that aren't available in Europe that are very available here. So, there is a trade-off. With AI, for example, Europe, you'd mentioned things that you could do like legally with AI and things that you could do illegally. There's prohibitions in the AI legislation that's been passed in the European Union against what's referred to as dark patterns. And what a dark pattern is an automated decision making, basically where an AI could decide, I apply for a loan, and it looks at my file and says, nope, sorry, you're rejected. If you're going to reject a person based on certain things that they've inputted into a system in a fully automated way from AI, that's not necessarily allowed in Europe. Where in the United States, that could still be allowed. So unfortunately, AI is still a product of the information that we feed it, like a large language model. It's still a product of, garbage in, garbage out, or treasure in, treasure out, gold in, gold out. So if the information that we're feeding it's biased or it's not following, a good scientific method, we could end up creating a machine automation system or an AI that makes very bad decisions. So. Yeah, so there's a lot of philosophers and computer scientists working on that problem right now, and they're coming up with ways that it can test for bias within AI. And they do it usually through a regression analysis where they just change one variable, like maybe demographic or something, racial demographic or something. I'm just making something up. And then they test and see if they get different results. And if they do, and they've only changed one variable and everything else is the same, then they're like, oh, something's wrong with our decision-making process here. So there's ways of retroactively kind of testing it. It's not perfect. And it's a little beyond what I do. So I'm sure probably a software engineer could give a much better explanation than I can, but that's the basic idea.
Interesting. So if you have a system then that you see has a bias in it, will you be able to delete that out, or do you have to, that's always going to be in there and you just kind of have to try and steer it in a different direction?
No, you can delete it out. I mean, you can reprogram the large language model to, well, first of all, software engineers that create large language models will be the first to say they don't 100% understand how it works, which is very comforting. But but you can adjust the model, and you can adjust the model for bias, and it's generally pretty effective. You can also what the European legislation does is it says that if you're going to be making a decision that can affect someone's life based on demographics with an AI model, there still has to be a human in the middle that makes the final decision. So it's loan rejected. This still goes in front of a loan approval officer at the end that says, okay, the AI recommended this, or a judge for judicial sentencing. Okay, a jury found this person guilty. This is what we're recommending for their sentence, 20 years. The judge still has to review it. So there's still a human in the middle. The United States doesn't have that legislation yet. But we tend to kind of go the opposite way. We've been a little more let's let it run and let's see, let's not stifle innovation. Let's see what happens. And then we can always put in legislation later. Again, I don't know what's the right way to do it, but it's definitely two different approaches.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Let's see, we can go on to our next question. This one's from chapter 6. It's in the little section of the chapter labeled Secure Our Devices. The author outlines some security standards for computers, software, and devices. Number 8 of this kind of little Secure Our Devices list that he puts out is preserve online functionality, where users should be able to turn off all incoming and outgoing network connections while still being able to use the device. But this feels like it should already be a default function or option. So why don't we have that?
Yeah. So in short, market forces and network effects. So I would say, and what I mean by that is like market forces, it's because there's a perverse incentive for the manufacturer. They want to gather as much data as they can. Data is gold, data is potential revenue streams, data is cross-marketing opportunities. So, like as much data as they can gather from the people that use their products. And there's not necessarily anything nefarious about this. Like if I knew everything there is to know about everyone that uses my legal services, like it would allow me to market better to them and probably get more business, and that would be great for me. But that's so. There's just this perverse incentive not to design it that way. Then I also, by network effects, I mean the more devices that are networked together and talking to each other, the more like innovative opportunities or the more potentialities that are out there that maybe we haven't even thought of yet that we can start doing things with. Like maybe like when Taylor Swift releases her new album, if there's a bunch of dolls out there on the internet that are like speak to me, Sally dolls or whatever he talked about. And it's kind of like, you two learned their lesson from this, but maybe you could push out the new Taylor song and the doll could sing. To have that platform available to you and have that opportunity available to you, that's very appealing to different companies. So much like your question about fully mechanical devices, I do think there is a niche market out there for, like Apple really tried to lean into this with their phone for a while for privacy. Like, we've got your phone kind of hardened out of the box. We've got privacy baked in, privacy by design. I think there is a niche market out there for companies that want to do that and want to be like, hey, out of the box, this is hardened out of the box. We've turned this off, unless you turn it on. But that is not the case for most companies right now.
So it's truly just about selling things to us.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yeah. Well, and the government's not making them do it. Again, under like GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, the European regulation that governs all data privacy that he talks about near the end of the book, you could not do that, without affirmative, explicit consent. And, you have to inform people when you're collecting any kind of personally identifying information about them and for what purpose. And you have to make it available to them if they ask for it within a certain amount of time. You have to delete it if they ask you to delete it. None of that really. Now, we have some state laws that kind of replicate that a little bit here in the United States, but it's not a federal thing. And it's not the way we approach data privacy in the United States, for better or for worse.
So I don't want to try and be like, oh, I know what happens in like the decision-making rooms of these types of companies, but is it that the option was never considered, or it was never like, we're not putting that on the table because we want to sell things?
I mean, I think it was even worse. I think it was considered and they were like, yeah, we want to sell it. I think it was considered and then rejected. I mean, but when I've started a company before, you just get excited about the possibilities. I think very few people are sitting around like, how can I take as much people's data as possible and market to them and just annoy them with text messages and emails and everything else. I think it's just natural to be like, we have this data and we have, so many different avenues. What can we do with it and how can we possibly sell more products and services? And I think that just naturally comes out of that through different decision makers, whether you're talking about sales or marketing or IT. Different people get different ideas, and this data is available and they see it as an asset and want to do something with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot more sense, but I'm still kind of salty about it. So
yeah, it's a blind lumbering thing that's kind of like a beast outside of one person's individual control.
Yeah. I know that I'm going probably a little out of order for these questions, but since we've already kind of brought in what Europe is doing and what the US isn't doing, I want to skip to is it the last question I have for you?
I haven't read the question, so you can read it in any order you want.
I'm trying to make it flow a little bit that it makes sense, but I'm not as good as Allison is. Oh, yes. Okay, so from chapter 10, and really kind of the whole second half of the book, the author spends majority of it arguing that the government should enact policies concerning the Internet Plus security instead of private market-led initiatives. At the end of chapter 8, the author states, "We in the US are setting norms with our own behavior by using the internet for both surveillance and attack. We are telling the world that those things are okay. By prioritizing offense over defense, we are making everyone less safe." Does the US government even want to provide regulation? Is it in their best interest to do that? Or because of the level of espionage that they're gaining from having kind of a Wild West approach with the internet? Or is it going to be kind of like when the chapter on Plan B, what likely is going to happen, that the US is going to be forced to do it because everybody else is?
I think the U.S. will be forced to do it, but I think also, I don't know if the U.S. doesn't want to do it, or if it's just the nature of our federalist system that makes it more difficult to do it. Like when you're European Union or you're a unitary government like France, it's a little easier to pass legislation kind of like on a country level, nation state level that filters down and kind of affects everyone.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have state level data privacy regulations, like California is the big one, the California Consumer Privacy Act. But then there's a lot of other states passing very similar legislation. And if you want to direct business or do business in California, which if you're a company any bigger than just working within Indiana, yes, you want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They're a huge market, fourth economy in the world or whatever. So by default, California's rule kind of becomes everybody's rule. And so I think there will be an effort, and I'm in the minority view on this point. I'll say most privacy attorneys say that we're going to have this patchwork of 50 different state privacy laws forever, and we're going to have sectoral privacy laws like HIPAA, FERPA, and those are going to exist forever, and we're never going to have an overarching federal privacy law. The majority of data privacy attorneys believe that. I do not believe that. I think we will have a federal privacy law at some point. It got very close a few years ago to having one. And I think we're going to have so many different, at some point, market forces are going to make it where there's 50 different states. The compliance costs are very high to adhere, for a company I work for that sells products in all 50 states. I have to know all 50 privacy laws that are out there and to make sure we're not violating anything. That's an enormous compliance cost for a business.
Yeah.
So to have a federal privacy law that can preempt all that and say, no, this is the baseline, and maybe you can't go any further than this, or maybe that's the floor, or maybe that's the ceiling. I think eventually it's going to be demanded by the market. Now, to answer your other question about offense and defense, there's a lot of political scientists and software engineers and stuff working on this. There's a thing called the Talon Manual, and it's right now it's the version's 2.0, but they're working on a 3.0. And what the Talon Manual is, it came out from all these academics and military officials and all the spies, all the spy agencies, alphabet soup agencies that are all members of NATO. And they've kind of put together this best practices. It's not a legislation, it's not binding law or anything, but it's a best practices playbook on what's allowed for nation states responding to cyber attacks or that are being attacked by other nation states or actors in other nation states. And right now it doesn't allow for offensive, attacks, but it does allow a nation state to engage in a preemptive strike if they think that a cyber attack's coming. So that does have potential to definitely spiral out of control, and it's just
Because it sounds like when it comes to cyber attacks, the author kind of got into this by saying an unpeace type of era, I guess, when it comes to cyber attacks, and we're getting to the point where there's countries that will own up to them. I think Russia was used as an example, and they're like, what are you going to do?
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to do about it? So what could these punishments be in the future? If we have some kind of UN version of.
Yeah. So if we don't have any kind of collective action to hold, the problem is once you're a pariah state, you're a pariah state. And so at that point, you might as well engage in like North Korea does this all the time, and Bitcoin scams and everything else. You know, like once no one's engaging you on a diplomatic level, you really don't have anything to lose to engage in this. I do think if like, not saying that all countries don't spy on each other, because we do, but like if it was an attack that originated from France, there would be pressure within the Order of Nations and the United Nations and NATO, you know, to kind of hold those people accountable. So I think it's going to be not a purely IT or cyber solution type thing. It's going to be more economic pressures of, you know, trade deals or tariffs, or not allowing immigration, or not allowing, you know, people in from a certain country or travel to a certain country, or, you know, possible military, you know, things like, so it's going to require other diplomatic levers other than probably a IT solution to get these countries in line.
So you think we're going to have like some people that actually know IT and like know what's going on? Because I don't feel like your average politician really understands kind of the cyber world in general. So we're going to have more agents like that, or do we have them already?
I mean, I say this as an attorney, but also with a science background. Like, we do have like a deficit of science, you know, just in Congress in general. You know, we have too many lawyers and not enough scientists, you know, and like, it's even better if it's a scientist that's also a lawyer, but you know, it's a real issue. So I think it's going to be education, you know, on the part, and it's going to be, unfortunately, probably a response when something bad happens. You know, like, hopefully it doesn't happen here. Hopefully it doesn't happen anywhere, but if it does happen somewhere, hopefully it's somewhere else, you know, where it's lessons learned, and we're going to have to adapt. But, you know, it's kind of like, we do the right thing after all other options are exhausted. You know, like, I do think that like we will find ways to do this, and we'll start implementing best practices. We'll start decentralizing some of our networks so that like we can't have one catastrophic attack, but it's going to be a learning process, and there's going to be a lot of bumps along the road, I think.
Okay. Okay. I only have one more question outlined, so I'm going to depend on all of you to have questions to fill the rest of the time. So start thinking about it now. So the author repeats throughout the book that the internet is never designed with security in mind, due to it being primarily used for communication between academic and research institutions. Why was this considered okay at the time? Because I mean, it's throughout history we see that like communications like get intercepted by people that the messages were not meant for, and I mean, there's no shortage of important information at research and academic institutions. So why even create something with no real security, as far as I understand, kind of in mind?
I mean, I think if you look at most technologies are like that, you know, when they first start. Like, I think of like I have a ham radio license, you know, like with ham radio, anyone can go buy a ham radio and they can listen to anything on those channels. There is no security on those. You can listen to them. You can talk, it's illegal, but you can talk on them, you know, without having your license. I think if you look at your old like POTS telephone system, like your plain old telephone system, if you like Google like a beige box, you know, or a lineman's handset, you know, like back in the day when I was a kid, you could go to Radio Shack, get the crystals, create a lineman's handset, you could build it, go down the street, the little gray box that's sitting there, you could take the cover off, I could clip those on, and I could listen to anyone's phone calls on the whole street. You know, like, just, there was no security.
Yeah, not that you've ever done that before.
Not that I've ever done that before. But there's like zero security to that. And it's just like, as you design a system, you're designing it for functionality first, to see if it's a market fit and to see if it's even feasible. And then a lot of times, unfortunately, security is an afterthought. But like, if I'm a startup inventing some new communication technology and I've got 6 months runway and I've got $1 million, like, the last thing I'm really probably thinking about doing, unless my product's being marketed to like the FBI or law enforcement, is necessary. I want it to be secure, but that's not where my dollars are going. My dollars are going to consumer-facing, customer-facing features, and I'm trying to build that out.
Interesting. So like, why is it strictly just because it's more expensive then? That's why security and privacy are such an afterthought? Or is there going to come a time where like we can just have kind of a Like, all right, here's your blueprint for your basic security and privacy that will get you started, and it's not super expensive, and it was along the lines of whatever Europe is doing, whatever the US, California, I guess, are doing. Do we have that?
Yeah, so there's frameworks out there. There's frameworks for privacy and there's frameworks for computer security. There's a lot of different organizations that do these frameworks. There's like ISO in Europe, or International Standards Organization. There's like NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology here in the US. They have like a NIST CSF framework. It's like a cybersecurity framework. You're building a network or your system, or you're building an application. These are the, security controls that we want to see in place. It's spoken at a very high level, very agnostically, but those are kind of the things that you want to check, and then like privacy has a very similar thing. There's a thing called privacy by design, where it's just you're baking into privacy along every single step of the creation of a particular device or application. So I think now as it gets more mature, especially in software, for sure, but for any other kind of high technology, these things are being considered and more baked in because people have done the hard, boring work of creating these frameworks out there. And anymore, it's now a thing of taking something to market. Like if I'm going to take something to market, cybersecurity and privacy are just on top of everyone's mind, and you're going to get asked about it. So 20 years ago, when you're trying to get funding from venture capitalists, they might not ever think like, well, are you SOC 2 compliant? They're going to say, what is that?
Yeah.
But now that's a standard question. If you have like a software application, they want to talk about compliance and cybersecurity.
Oh, so I mean, we have a smart fridge, I guess, that loves to update itself. Like, does that have your kind of like basic framework of security into it? Does would everybody's smart fridge have that, or like you have to put that in?
Not our particular fridge because it's really old and we got it with the house, so it's probably a disaster.
Yeah.
But we also, I do think though that probably the new products that are coming out there, and there are requirements by different legislation. If your product's going to collect any kind of like personally identifiable information, like it's going to sync with your calendar, for example, it has to have certain things baked into it, or it could open them up to legal liability. So the law is catching up. Attorneys are catching up, from product liability kind of lawsuits and stuff that come from these things, or data privacy lawsuits. So it is going to get more mature and more secure.
Okay. I mean, I guess for one more kind of like fun and stupid question before I like open it up to the group and we can have like a more open discussion with Clark, is we hear a lot of like major businesses, major companies or institutions having an attack, and they get brought down, and ultimately it's kind of something funny that they got hacked through. What is the funniest item, I guess, that you wouldn't think connects to the internet that has been hacked?
Well, I mean, he gives this example in the book of the aquarium at a casino in Vegas. I mean, that's kind of the one that everybody goes to. It was literally just like a temperature regulator, or like a water acidity regulator or something in an aquarium tank. And they were able to pivot from there onto the network. But I've seen all sorts of things. I mean, I've seen smoke alarms. I've seen children's toys connected to a network that has, a vulnerability on it, and hackers were able to then pivot onto the network through that. Anything that you can imagine, any kind of IoT device, if it's not been properly secured and hardened, like it has potential to be a threat.
Yeah, like I've thought about my fish tank temperature regulator, like opening my system up to vulnerabilities, because I wouldn't even assume that connected to the internet.
Yeah. Now, depending on what kind of like maturity level you're at as an organization, at other institutions I've worked at, or other universities I've worked at, like if you're going to connect the device to the secure network, or to the network that everyone's using for production work, like someone, maybe not, I don't know, but someone that works for me knows, a network engineer knows if a device gets plugged in and gets activated. And a lot of times it will just deny connections from that device. Like we had a deny all set up, to connect to our network unless it was registered. And each device had to be registered. It had to be like, what is the purpose of this? Has it been looked at by like our hardware engineers? So there are, again, frameworks and governance in place that would hopefully prevent something like this from happening. But it does, and you got to be pretty mature as an organization, and
Yeah.
it's difficult.
Yeah, because I mean, how would you even, if I didn't know that my fish tank aquarium connected
Yeah.
to the internet, how do I even bring that to IT if like I need to be able to connect my fish tank aquarium to the internet?
Yeah, you might not even. It might be things that you don't even think about. You're bringing your space heater in because your feet get cold under your desk.
Valid.
And
That
it
was so
connects
real.
to the internet, and you've plugged it into the network, and now it's the Bluetooth was left on, and someone's able to do something from that creative. It's a constant struggle, and that's why you'll hear IT people, rail and shake their fist at the sky against like shadow IT.
Mhm.
And that's what they mean. It's like this IT we don't know about that gets connected to the network that we've never had a chance to vet. We don't know what it is. We don't know what its purpose is. What is this thing? And that's why they freak out about it. But, I can also see from the other person's perspective now that I'm not in the IT department anymore, where I'm like, I just want to do this. And why do I have to do all these things?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I know what I'm doing, but I understand it.
Yeah.
It's aggravating.
Yeah, no, it is, but I also understand it. But it also makes me want to unplug everything I ever own now. So to try not
Well, I mean,
have
I'm
any
in support of that,
vulnerabilities.
so like that's, I think our fridge is the only thing that we have that connects to the internet. So,
I don't even know if it's connected to our internet either. I just hear it updating in the middle of the night.
well, I've got it blocked from everything.
Oh,
I've got it hardened,
I don't know.
so it does update, but it only updates to a particular IP. But yes, but yeah, it was a pain in the butt, and the average person wouldn't know how to do that.
All right. Well, I would love to open it up to the floor for anybody that has questions for Clark about the refrigerator running or whatever it could be. Yes, please.
So, could we talk about programmable line controllers, PLCs, and subsets?
Sure.
So, and you know, a little bit about it.
Okay.
Subset was a virus that was developed by the Israelis. And some agencies.
Allegedly. Yeah.
And its purpose was to infect Siemens PLCs,
Yep.
which were operating centrifuges in IBM that was separating uranium. And all it did was speed up the centrifuge a little bit, slow it down a little bit, the fuzz would wear out in a matter of a few weeks or months.
Mhm.
So years, it took them a long years to figure out that it wasn't a mechanical or maintenance issue, that it was actually a virus.
Mhm.
As soon as they figured out that, they pull that virus out and they started marketing it. And now, they're able to take that virus and fix Siemens PLCs that run turbines in
Mhm.
the United States.
Yep.
So, I mean, you mentioned things that keep you up at night. This is what keeps you up. I know that I work in an industrial automation, and I know how those engineers think. They're not worried about internet security. They're not IT people.
Yeah.
They're just worried about getting the machines right.
Yeah.
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 And those Siemens PLCs, they don't get regular security updates. Nobody's looking at them, and they are all connected to the internet.
Yep. That is a situation in a lot of places for sure. There's a whole domain of security or like an area of interest. If you go to like these conventions like DEF CON, there'll be like a whole track, that you can go to that's called SCADA security that's looking at things like that, like these old Siemens machines or, like furnaces or power grids, any of those kind of like large industrial machines and the programs that go around them. And a lot of the best practice for that is to take those machines off the internet. We tried to do that with like, sorry, I got to think for a second if I can even say this. So for some places I've worked before, like the building automation machines we've had, they were connected to the internet. And then we were like, why did these need to be connected to the internet for like our HVAC system and stuff? And they'd say like, well, for updates, okay, how often do we update them? Well, we haven't since like 2017. Okay, well, why don't we have a change management program? And when you're ready to update them, then we will connect it to the internet, update them and not, but most places don't have that. And most places they're connected all the time.
So most PLCs, very often they're not.
Mhm.
Probably 50% of the PLCs out there are CPU based. But, they're almost always networked, and there's something called HMI, human machine interface,
Mhm.
which is going to be using a Windows-based computer.
Yep.
And that is going to be on the internet because there's a manager or an engineer or something that wants to be able to set things and see what things are, alarms and stuff at home.
Yep.
So these type of internet connections into that HMI, which is definitely connected to the PLC. They're all connected.
Yep. Yeah, that's the bane of my existence is the executive that says they want to see everything at home on their phone. You know, like, because it happens all the time, you know, and then it's like, well, they are the CEO of the company or they're the, you know, president or they're the, you know, insert your government official here. And yeah, and so, but there are things that you can do to, that's never great. I would never really advocate that as a CISO that would not be a solution that I would be in support of, but there's been definitely times I've been overruled on things. And there is ways to harden that, you know, so I would say like, well, can we set a static IP address on his laptop and is he willing to compromise that he'll only connect and look at this dashboard from this particular machine? And, you know, like we can have him still have to authenticate through that. And so we can put different gates in place, but this is just my opinion, like a machine, industrial machine like that should never be connected to the internet. You know, like that's, I just don't think that, but they are, you know, yep.
So it would only take so you get turbines, these giant turbines that are producing electricity from the grid. If you killed about a dozen of them, it would probably bring down the whole grid for the whole United States.
Yeah, and it'll probably happen someday somewhere.
Those turbines are not, those spare parts on the shelf, they're really well handmade.
Hmm.
Some of them decades and decades. You can't be replaced with it.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Yes, Rufus.
I'm gonna ask Allie a question.
Right.
Softball here. How secure is our infrastructure in the United States? You mentioned power grids, things like ATMs, things like gas station pumps. That is surely part of it very secure, right?
Yeah. Well, so I would say nothing is secure really out there. I would say we definitely have a big deficit when it comes to cybersecurity and just learning best practices. And I get it. It's like he says in the book, you know, the attacker only has to be right once and, you know, that's it. And, you know, I've definitely gotten like a lot of frustrating things before of like, oh my gosh, I have to like do two-factor authentication again. Like, why did I just send a text? Like, I just logged in 5 seconds ago. You know, so that's what that's what the attackers depend on, is that they depend on you getting frustrated. They depend on you getting soft. They depend on you like not having like full vigilance at all times. And that's why we've got to like take some of that burden off the humans. And we've got to start designing like systems that like, you know, like if the turbine's never connected to the internet, then I don't have to worry about the CEO getting tired of like, you know, getting frustrated about having to enter two-factor authentication 10 times a day when he or she's checking the dashboard. You know, like, so there's just certain things like when I've been CISO, I had less passwords than anybody. I didn't know anything because I knew I was like a target. You know, I was constantly getting like phished. I was constantly, you know, getting social engineering attacks, things against me. And I'm like, I don't want to know anything. I'm not the one updating. I'm not the one doing the smart hands work updating that. So why do I need to know the password? Well, I don't know. You're the C-suite. That's exactly why I don't need to know that. You know, like I'm just here to set strategy. You know, so.
Oh, we have one right here. I know you've been waiting for a minute.
So, normal person, like me, all the stuff that connects, you don't want it to. What can the average person be doing? Most practical steps.
Yeah. So.
Safeguard what's important.
Excellent question.
I generally, a lot of Bluetooth devices, I generally turn Bluetooth off by default unless I need it for a specific purpose. You know, like if I'm connecting my headphones in, you know, you have to have Bluetooth on that to work with your phone. But like whenever I have my headphones out, I turn Bluetooth off on my phone. Like I don't need it. So I turn it on and I'm just going to use it whenever I'm buying a device I don't know a lot about, or I'm trying to kind of shop. I'll go on YouTube and I'll just kind of look, on different kind of like security or privacy reviews about different devices and try to pick it that way. And I very often, I know a lot of people would not probably do this, but like whenever I get all the features off and then I turn them on as I decide I want to use them, and I'm just like, let's just see what the basic vanilla device is. And then if I want to do a feature and it's like, oh, you got to turn on location services to do this. Like, do I need location services for this? Yeah, okay, I do want a pizza delivered. I'll turn it on, but if I needed it to, like, I don't gamble, but if I was going to place a sports bet and it needed to know my location, it'd be like, I don't need that. I don't need that feature. So I kind of go with the turn it off and turn it on as you need it sort of way as a general guide.
So we should always reject all cookies and all that thing.
I reject all cookies all the time. I just always say strictly necessary is what I do, and then again, that's what they depend on, is you getting on a website and being like, oh, well, I just want to read the news. I get asked about it every single time, and every single time I'm like, strictly necessary only, reject otherwise. And yeah.
Oh, sorry, we have a question here, and then we got a question all the way in the back as well.
You just talked a minute ago about passwords and two-factor authentication. And of course, passwords are crazy.
Yep.
What is going to be the solution in 5 or 10 years to authenticate ourselves?
Yeah, so I think we'll get away from passwords completely, and we're going to go more probably towards biometrics. Is probably we're already seeing it with computers now, with your finger or your retina, that you can look into it. People, like, the password to me is already kind of dead, and like passphrase is in, like a phrase that you can remember that's a longer phrase. But eventually it's going to get to where, especially if quantum computing happens and they got these like things that can guess these very long passwords, in seconds or minutes, we're going to have to look for a different solution. And probably biometrics is probably the most likely candidate at this point, but then that, like anything, is also a trade-off. Like, do I want Microsoft to have a scan of my retina? I don't know. Maybe not. Like, so.
Yeah.
So for my home network, I use VPN, NordVPN.
Yeah.
For my phone, I have it for my how does that, how do you feel about the security of that device? Do you think it's worth the money, or is there going to be a time, like in a few years, that technology is going to be obsolete as well?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you an engineer answer on this. Okay, good. So NordVPN is one of my favorite ones. So NordVPN and Proton VPN are probably like the two that I would recommend. So you picked a good product. Now, a VPN, a lot of times I think people have, what people don't understand with a VPN is it's just taking your internet connection, your network connection, and it's routing it through somebody else's computer. So the security is only as good as that you can trust the person that you're routing all of your information through. So there's a lot of VPNs out there that I'm 100% convinced are owned by nation states, that they just make these like VPNs like, or at least affiliated with nation states, where they make these cheap or free or available, and then they promote it as security. And people sign up for it, and they've got, like Yeah, and I think it's you and you too to like be excited about what you built. And cybersecurity people suck in that regard. You know, it's like I've built this like cool. Hey, I built this application that lets me negotiate rent or it finds an apartment for me, negotiates rent with the landlord, and I've proven that I'm getting 80% lower rents, you know, with this lease than I do with everything else. And then this nerd comes in and like it's completely insecure and I've already hacked it in 5 seconds and I've destroyed your dreams. That sucks, you know, but that's why it's important.
Software like that should be the same as stuff that they put out on it. They have to go through, make sure, let's say, pharmaceutical product, you have to make sure that it's safe and blah, 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 blah. So why would that industry have to be just as,
Yeah.
responsible as a company? So I think that there should be more security that should be part of. I know it's not exciting, I'm sure people in other industries don't think it's exciting.
Yeah.
The
answer is lobbyists.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's definitely a trade-off.
Yeah, there's very few like protections for it seems for major institutions when they get hacked. We talk about a hospital here in Indiana that has the finest ransom for 55 grams. That's small, but still not nothing. They just ended up paying. Yeah.
Okay, that's almost the one.
Yeah.
They're just, another hack.
Yeah.
If somebody is like killed like it's killed,
Yeah.
somebody they're gonna be like, oh my God, they need to do something.
Yeah. Yeah, and where's the intervention for it?
I don't understand
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Putting on like the devil's advocate hat, you know, I'm going to be clear, I agree with you. But like you know, we've also built, we are the leading, you know, country in the world with like software because, you know, we have companies like Facebook that have a motto of like move fast and break things. And, you know, like we want to try to innovate, you know, and innovate and iterate and fail quickly and fail often. And we've invented a lot of cool stuff because of that. But it's definitely a trade-off. And like, I think that like, the more we think about it, the more we have intelligent people thinking about these things and approaching it earnestly and trying to make things better, you know, I hope that we'll end up in a better place.
So you said that you think maybe not most people in this field, but
Yeah.
you think that a national privacy law is likely.
Yeah.
But based on market demand, how do you see that? Like, do you think that enough consumers will demand that, or that ultimately?
No, I think enough lobbyists and big companies will want it. You know, like,
What was their motivation?
yeah, so like, maybe I'm inventing like OpenAI or Copilot from Microsoft, and suddenly we've got 50 different states that have different definitions of what personal information can mean. Like maybe one state says your IP address is personal information, where another state says like, well, there's personal information and there's sensitive information, which has even a higher bar to it. You know, like, okay, well, maybe my medical records are sensitive information in Oregon, but and maybe my child or they go to school sensitive information in Alabama, but it's not in all these other states. And then you've got a product that's collecting all of those different categories, and then you're getting suddenly this company that's like huge on the West Coast starts expanding out east, and you're getting sued, and you're like, I didn't know about this obscure Alabama law. You know, like what is going on? Like, can we just have some? If business people like anything, you know, like I'm often here to say, I said it myself, like I don't need to agree with the rules of the game. I just need to know what the rules of the game are, and then I'll pay a lawyer to drive a truck to it, you know, or get around it, you know, find a way to innovate around it. But it needs to be a level playing field that I need to know through. And I think that when you have 50 different states passing different rules for things, you know, eventually the lobbyists in the industry are going to say, we need to set a floor, and the way to set that floor is federal law that preempts the states and makes it more consistent. Yeah. Yeah, they have like a kind of like, you have the Articles of Confederation of the Constitution. They have like a nascent kind of law that before GDPR that they were trying to do, but then that set a floor, and then they let the individual countries start enforcing it, and then they were like, oh god, this is a disaster, because they all define things different ways. And so then they came in. Now they did have the kind of the cultural mindset already of native privacy being human right. So it's like, like there in Europe, like union membership is like ethnic origins, familial origins, based on what happened in World War II. Like they're much more sensitive about these types of things, like trade union membership. So that's very sensitive information there. Where in the United States, it's like Uncle Larry's in a union, of course he's in a union. Like everyone knows that. Like that's not really protecting information. You don't have that history. So I would say that GDPR was easier for them to pass because they already had a cultural sensitivity and they're more acclimated to it. I don't know if we'll ever get there, but at least to that level. And I should say that they are talking about softening GDPR a little bit because it is very onerous, especially on small businesses. So they're talking about right now actively doing a carve out for smaller and medium-sized businesses to where they don't have to necessarily adhere to everything that all the other companies, larger companies.
General comment. Single membership, start off like food, regulation, or new technology, or social. Very next paragraph, we would certainly explain about why it's too expensive, the possibility.
Yeah.
Kind of like, it seems like it encompasses the overall kind of like how annoying it is as well to try and enact these things. I think that is time. I don't want anybody past where we're supposed to be ending. I'd like to thank Clark for coming and talking to us. For hosting, and thank you Indiana Humanities, Indiana Sciences, Minneapolis Public Libraries, folks from there. Next month.
Thanks to our tech.
Yes, thank you, Griffiths. Welcome back. It's so nice to see you. I've been back last month, but first time we've seen you. Welcome back. And our book next month is Why We Sleep. Thank you. I definitely want to know this.